Hello, Senator Hancock.
Hello, Assembly Member Jones Sawyer. Mr. Chairman.
Madam Chair, SB 1110, item number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Senator Anderson, my principal co-author, would be here, but he's chairing the Public Safety Committee in the Senate right now, so I could be down here. I'd like to start by saying that I accept the additional amendments proposed by the committee and the Republican consultant, that the report on the program be submitted to the legislature in April of 2019 so that the legislature
Sorry, I believe there are no amendments.
What?
I'm being told there are no amendments, or
No, there was an amendment, which was just to move up the report so that the legislature would get it in April of 2019, so that by when the bill would sunset in January of 2020, there would have been an opportunity, thank you, to review the data.
Okay.
Move to bill.
Second, and I believe these amendments will be done in approps and not
Yes.
here. Okay.
We'll do that in appropriations. And I think Assembly Member Jones Sawyer knows all about this program, too, because he and I were at a White House domestic policy briefing on it, a pre-booking diversion program involving really community collaborations between law enforcement, social services, prosecution, and community organizations. It saved a considerable amount of money in Seattle and had a profound effect on rearrests, lowering them by as much as 58%. We do have money in the budget. This bill would establish the parameters of a 3-jurisdiction pilot program, 3 of them for a 3-year period, to be followed by an analysis and next steps. And I would respectfully ask for your aye vote. With me is Glenn Bacchus
Mr. Backus.
from the Drug Policy Alliance, and I believe Jonathan Feldman from the California Police Chiefs Association.
It was the intent of both of us not to be running through the hall to be the witness on this important bill. But Drug Policy Alliance is amongst the supporters, along with Californians for Safety and Justice, and we are have the support of the California Police Chiefs Association to go forward with a pilot. You're very familiar with the program. I will not take the committee's time except to say it's a pilot program. It allows us to test an approach that will require the support of the local prosecutor or district attorney, will require the support of local law enforcement leadership. It is a partnership. It is a pilot, and it's strongly supported by both proponents for reform and law enforcement proponents for reform.
Okay. Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Name and organization.
I, Ingram with the ACLU of California, in support.
Maureen Washburn with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice, in support.
Any questions from committee members? Oh, any opposition? I'm just off today. I don't want anybody opposing anything today for some reason. You have 4 minutes. How you divvy it up is up to you.
Hi, I'm with the U.S. Prostitutes Collective, and we are very upset at the way this bill process has gone on. We were not included. Sex workers have no input in the bill, and we haven't been included in the bill process. We have been asking for the sex work part of the bill to be removed. We have been joined by the key organizations in California, sex worker organizations, and nationally and internationally. We want to hear from the senator why this is continuing to be included when the people impacted are against it. The amended bill is very problematic. The key thing is because LEAD is law enforcement led. It gives the police great discretion to decide who can be brought into the program and who not. And we all know who's going to be targeted by the police. It's going to be black, trans, immigrant, low and no income people. The Oakland police scandal has exposed just how much police corruption there is in relation to sex workers. And this bill is giving the police more power over sex workers, and we really think that part should be removed. We're also really concerned about the assessment interview that sex workers have to go through. What kind of information is going to be collected? What questions will be asked, and what will happen to this information? SB 1110 is effectively proposing a registration scheme for sex workers. Programs like LEAD, many sex workers see as soft sell criminalization. It's only going to increase criminalization. And we really ask, why can't services be available without involving the police? We really want to hear from the senator about that. We don't think services should include the police. It goes against the international demands of the sex worker movement, which is for decriminalization. And Amnesty International, as you probably know, has just released a groundbreaking policy in support of decriminalization.
Thank you. Any other witnesses?
Alex Berliner with All of Us or None. We are also extremely concerned about the clause that talks about sex workers in this bill, mainly because we've seen the LEAD program implemented in other states create harmful environments for trans women, especially black trans women, and like Rachel said, no income or low income people of color. And one thing that sticks out is having law enforcement being included in services that are provided. Right now in San Francisco County with the No Jail Coalition, we're working to find ways to deal with people who have been targeted by the police so that they can get into services that are not run by the police. They're run by social workers and people working in the community, and we're finding a lot of positive feedback around that, and people seeing those models in their community working a lot better than the LEAD program. So it would be really important to see something like that rather than having law enforcement involved. Like, we see that all the way around in the community, that law enforcement actually creates more harm when trying to work with the community, because their job is to police you, and they're not social workers, they're slave catchers, and we cannot deal with that. All of Us or None would really like to see this part about sex workers removed, because we also understand that people who have been criminalized for sex work are also formerly incarcerated people, and that widens the gap for formerly incarcerated people to recidivize and be targeted. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. My name is Joseph Falcon Freeman, Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. I just wanted to speak for a moment about my personal experience. While living in Arizona in 2013, I witnessed firsthand the devastating unintended consequences that a similar sex work diversion program had. That so-called diversion program led directly to increased local law enforcement raids targeting sex workers, which were intended to sweep people into services, but instead swept people into the criminal legal system. So this bill, while we support the good intentions of reducing incarceration of some of our most disadvantaged community members, we believe that the application of this bill to prostitutes, to sex workers, should be completely removed, and we urge you to take that action.
Thank you.
My name is Sydney Ross Risden. I'm active in efforts to reverse the growing poverty of women and children. Rising poverty is increasing the numbers of women, particularly mothers, going into sex work. SB 1110 would allow the police to present themselves as social workers, as you said, rather than law enforcement. Policing methods towards sex workers haven't changed, but are now justified in the name of saving victims. I live in LA, where the work of the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders has brought out the racist negligence of law enforcement that allowed the serial murders of as many as 100 black women to go on for decades. Police referred to these murders of
Ma'am, you have
prostitutes.
about 15 seconds.
Okay. Police referred to these murders of prostitutes and drug addicts as NHI, no human involved. Therefore, I urge you to listen seriously to the concerns of those who will be directly impacted by SB 1110.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in opposition?
Kim McGill from the Youth Justice Coalition. We're in opposition for the reasons stated.
Thank you. Any other witnesses?
Maritza Galvez, Youth Justice Coalition. We're in opposition for the reasons stated.
Thank you.
Juan Peña with the Youth Justice Coalition in opposition for the reasons stated.
Thank you.
Francisco with the Justice Coalition, opposition for the reasons stated.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee members? Mr. Lackey?
No, I have more a comment than I do a question. I really appreciate this perspective that's being brought forth by the author here. Just as a reminder, in contrast to some of the remarks that have been made, law enforcement has a great deal to benefit by such programs that have proven to be successful. In Seattle, where 58% were proven to be less likely to be arrested after pursuing this program. We know that Santa Fe, New Mexico, Albany, New York, and others are considering this program as well because of the success. And, law enforcement risks their life every day to provide safety and security for this culture. And we have been characterized sometimes as people who are not committed to that very mission. And it's, I just take exception to that, being one who was part of that culture, and still very, very thankful for that opportunity I had to serve the community in that capacity. And I believe that they want to be good partners in providing leadership on this very, very difficult problem. These problems, there are more than one. They've just identified the prostitution piece, but there's drug offenses and other social anomalies that are causing heartache, and they're causing the breaking of families and causing some very, very serious problems. And we believe that our experience as a profession can prove to be very, very building and not demoralizing. So I thank you for what you're bringing forward, and I'm full support.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hancock, Senator Hancock, you may close.
Well, I would like to address some of the concerns that were raised. LEAD is not about general policy relating to whether or not prostitution should be decriminalized. LEAD, as it works in Seattle, is applied to people who are living in peril, not because they engage in sex work per se, although that can be a perilous occupation. But because of many conditions, drugs, alcohol, other things that end them up on the street. I think there are other kinds of convictions like shoplifting that might also be appropriate for LEAD, and we can look at that in the future. But often, my understanding is that prostitution takes place through the internet. This is a street-level law enforcement pre-booking, so you don't have a record, diversion program that is entirely voluntary. No one needs to be in it, and it won't be offered to everyone. It's actually law enforcement-led assisted diversion. There's training, and in talking to the officers that have done it, it engages them with their community and with social services in an entirely different way, and they make those calls for when someone is ready. I had one officer say, "I've been with people begging me. I know I've got a problem. I know I'm an addict. I know whatever. if only I could go somewhere other than back to jail and out of jail. And those are the people that this program will allow, law enforcement and social services working together. The program requires a very extensive kind of community involvement. In Seattle, it was everyone from the prosecutor's office to the ACLU working together, and the public defenders. So I hope that the program will move forward, and there is a short 11-minute film that I would be happy to share with the opposition if you haven't seen it. Chairman Joan Sawyer and I have seen it. I've seen it several times, and I learn something every time about why this moves us toward the restorative justice approach we just heard about from Assemblymember Weber in her bill. So I would ask for your aye vote and look forward to working with everyone involved in this issue as the bill moves forward.
And I want to thank you, and I want to thank the opposition for bringing in your concerns.
Yeah.
So that we could, I will tell you, Senator Hancock heard you, and she'll make sure that the things that you mentioned won't happen in California, won't be a part of her program. I had the pleasure of going to Washington, D.C., see and talk to the people who run the LEAD program. And the individuals, especially law enforcement individuals, actually remind me a lot of my colleague from Palmdale. They're officers with a big heart, and they want to make a difference. And in fact, one officer talked about someone on drugs, worked with them about 7 times because they were on and off. Normally, that individual would have been going to jail after the 2nd or 3rd offense, but he worked with that individual to ensure that they would make it. And it was kind of an out-of-body experience for a law enforcement officer to allow it to go on and on, but he could see some progress. And so I will say, and I'll remind Senator Hancock, I think we met some extraordinary people. And so we need to make sure the right people are involved in it so we don't have the kind of incidents that were mentioned today. And so I'm recommending an aye vote.
Thank you.
SB 1110, the motion is due pass to the Appropriations Committee. Joan Sawyer?
Aye.
Joan Sawyer, aye. Melendez? Lackey? Aye. Lackey, aye. Lopez? Lowe? Quirk? Aye. Quirk, aye. Santiago?
The measures on call need one more.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Go straight through. I don't think we have an afternoon. We only have 4 more. If I get there at 12:30, that's not bad. Now I can say good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. SB 139 would define legal consequences for the use and or possession of a synthetic cannabinoid or stimulant compound and update the list of prohibited substances. In 2004, I authored Senate Bill 1283, which was chaptered and signed into law by the governor, and at the time, these synthetic drugs were completely legal to possess and use. This was despite the fact that the drugs present a uniquely dangerous threat to public safety. These synthetic drugs are concocted in labs and manufactured in warehouses and manufactured or marketed to kids as legal drugs. A recent article in Forbes reported on the treatment of 40 people in Texas emergency departments over a 48-hour period for overdoses of the synthetic cannabinoid product called K2. Among individuals who need emergency treatment, symptoms included acute psychosis, epileptic seizures, and even heart attacks. The drugs have also been associated with numerous deaths and serious medical complications for first-time users. They have been associated with aggressive behavior, extreme delusions, and hallucinations. Since the passage of my bill in 2014, it's been brought to my attention that drug dealers are able to market the drugs to kids as legal drugs. And this is because underground chemists skirt the law by changing one chemical compound to create a drug that is now not illegal. SB 139 protects our communities and takes synthetic drugs off the streets by defining penalties for the personal possession of these dangerous substances and updates the code section to include the chemical compounds used as synthetic drugs. I have agreed to take amendments which would clarify that the substances listed in this bill are allowed for bona fide medical and scientific research. It's important to remember here that kids think that drugs that are not illegal are safe to use, and that was always the goal of the original legislation, to make clear the message to kids that it is not okay to use these synthetic substances as opposed to drugs that we know of that are illegal. I respectfully ask for your aye vote, and with me today I have the sponsor of the bill, John Lovell with the California Narcotics Officers Association.
Mr. Lovell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is John, and members. My name is John Lovell. I'm with the California Narcotic Officers Association. We feel a real sense of urgency with this issue. First of all, chemically, bath salts and spice are very different from literally every other controlled substance. Every other controlled substance, whether you're talking illegal controlled substances or legal controlled substances, amount to create a situation of slow dissipation. People eventually decline, and some alcohol abuse, for example, eventually results in death. The difference here is that a single ingestion of one of these drugs can cause someone to harm themselves or to harm others. The case recently, or 2-3 years ago, where someone under the influence of spice literally ate off the face of a homeless man in Florida, is just one of the more visible examples. There's a lot of these. The objective of the bill is twofold. As the senator pointed out, to continue with chemical currency, because one of the games that happens is the chemistry and the individual chemicals of the drugs are adjusted. And we've worked closely with the National Alliance for Model State Drug Laws in developing updated information, and it's still not updated. We need to do some modification if the bill moves forward. Now, I acknowledge that this committee voted on SB 236, which creates an analog system, and that is an important step forward. The challenge with an analog system, though, is analog of what? If you are creating a new chemical, which is some of what goes on here, as opposed to some molecular manipulation, if you're creating a new chemical, then there's nothing out there for the analog bill to latch onto. The other thing we are doing with the bill is we are creating misdemeanor penalties for possession. We are not interested in incarcerating people. We are interested in creating an inducement pathway for them to go to treatment. That's how high these stakes are. And if you'll notice, the language of the bill even says, hey, if you test dirty while you're in treatment, no, you still stay in treatment if you're making a commitment to go forward. So those are the things we're trying to achieve here. This is a very different product. It was featured on the cover of Newsweek magazine a couple of years ago, and there aren't perfect solutions that can be put in the four corners of any single bill, but there is a mixed method that we believe will work, and we would ask the committee for the opportunity to do that work.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Jones on behalf of the City of San Marcos. We'd like to thank the Senator for carrying this legislation. We would echo the comments of Mr. Lovell, hyper concerned about things that are marketed and targeted at youth and packaged in such a fashion that is very attractive. Very, very important problem for us to solve, and we're looking for this solution. We'd ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Are any other witnesses in support?
Chair and members, Jonathan Feldman with the California Police Chiefs Association in support.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. Sean Hoffman with the California District Attorneys Association, also in support.
Thank you.
My other law enforcement clients are also in support. I will spare you the recitation. All seven, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Lovell. Any witnesses in opposition?
Good afternoon. Glenn Backus for Drug Policy Alliance. We respectfully oppose. DPA is concerned that these penalties fail to deter use. They fail to reduce availability. Instead, the possession misdemeanors lead to costly jail overcrowding and harsh, lifelong, concomitant consequences without meaningful rehabilitation. California recently criminalized possession of synthetic compounds. The Senator's bill, SB 1283, went into effect this year. There's been no time to evaluate its effects or defects. And before it can be evaluated, SB 139 seeks to increase the criminal penalties and expand the universe of those who would be prosecuted. In addition, as this committee knows, criminal penalties are not just the 2, 3, or 6 months that are imposed. There are long-term consequences for even petty drug offenses like misdemeanor possession for personal use that come with lifetime consequences such as loss of educational benefits for college, denial of federally subsidized housing, denial of nutritional and job training benefits, reduced opportunity for employment in public and private sector, discharge from the military, and loss of veterans' benefits among them. We do not believe it is the Senator's intent to interfere with young people's education or their long-term economic viability, but that is the inevitable consequence of criminalizing and offering a misdemeanor penalty for possession of a substance for a person's use. We're also concerned with the ongoing racial disparities in enforcement. There's no reason to believe that the enforcement of this penalty should be any different than the other controlled substance penalties that fall disproportionately on black and brown young people. Lastly, in terms of getting kids to not use and inducement pathways, the public's better served by a comprehensive and accurate education and prevention program to dissuade drug use. The federal government, local governments, and state government should be investing in prevention strategies that are based on facts and education. The tobacco and education and tax initiatives have resulted in a massive reduction of tobacco use without the concomitant costs of criminalization, the ongoing economic costs of the families. For these reasons, among others, we believe on the balance this is not a bill that should be supported and would, in fact, do more harm than good. We respectfully oppose. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Maya Ingram with the ACLU of California. We also respectfully oppose because the increase in penalties for possession for personal use. This doesn't resolve existing problems with substance abuse. Using the criminal justice system to address substance abuse has led to a broken system that wastes billions of taxpayer dollars. We believe this bill can further exacerbate the problems with jail overcrowding. By most recent accounts, 38 facilities across 20 California counties are under court-ordered population caps. Since the policy of incarceration for personal use has been a dismal failure in this state, we don't believe that the state should pass new penalties that will further strain the capacity of California's jails.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in opposition?
Lucy Buchan, Californians United for a Responsible Budget.
Thank you.
Jim Lindbergh on behalf of the Friends Committee on Legislation of California in opposition.
Thank you.
Khalif Ossigai on behalf of the California Public Defenders Association opposition.
Thank you. Are there any questions from committee members? And you may close.
I wanted to respond to a few of the points that were raised by the opposition. Number one, this does not allow for jail time. It's a penalty not to exceed $250, which I would argue is about what someone might spend on the drugs otherwise. Number two, under Prop 36, if somebody completes a drug treatment program, it is wiped, the fact that they were arrested for the drug is wiped off of their record, and we're happy to take an amendment to clarify that in this bill. Number three, the original bill idea didn't come from law enforcement. It didn't come from reading a Newsweek magazine. It came when I was at my brother's home, and my 17-year-old nephew told me how the kids at his high school were using synthetic pot and these bath salts, and they were using that instead of regular marijuana and instead of methamphetamine or cocaine, because if they got caught, they couldn't get in trouble because they weren't illegal. This was anecdotal. My nephew telling me that this was going on at his high school. That's where the bill originated. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. So we've had several conversations about this bill, and as you know, I personally believe that the Hernandez bill that was passed out of this committee probably addresses a lot of what we need to do. And the bill in its present state with that alphabet soup of chemicals that was in the bill. I think probably Dr. Hernandez, Dr. Wood, Dr. Pan, and probably Dr. Quirk over here are the only ones that really understood what all those chemicals meant. We needed some more time. And so I think we had a pinky swear at least, that we'd allow this to go to approps with the understanding that if the chair of public safety, if we didn't come to some solution, that then it would not go out of appropriations.
Agreed.
And I just need you to say that so that we have it on the record, one, and because I've tried this once before. It didn't go so well, but this time, if I get it on the record, it might go a whole lot better, even though the pinky swear was really good. But I really would like for you both, the author and the sponsor, to give me that guarantee that if we can't work this out in approps, that it will not go any further from there.
Absolutely.
You have my commitment, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and with that, then the chair is going to recommend an aye vote, and then, I need a motion.
So moved.
Then I'll second.
SB 139, the motion is due pass to the Appropriations Committee. Jones Sawyer?
Aye.
Jones Sawyer, aye. Melendez? Lackey? Aye. Lackey, aye. Lopez? Lowe? Quirk? Quirk not voting. Santiago? Measures on call.
Measures on call. Senator Bell. SB 955.